On every piece of content about Atlanta I watch, there are people in the comment section posting awful, untrue things about what it's like to live in this city. Now, many of those comments are fueled by racism and should be immediately disregarded. However, if you're researching the city because you're moving here, it can be really difficult to tell between an ignorant comment that is racially motivated and a genuine criticism. So I thought I would go through some of the most common lies I see about living in Atlanta and tell you what my truth is as someone who's lived here since 2008. Let's get right into some of the most common lies about living in Atlanta, Georgia. Number one, that there's a massive homeless problem. I see this on almost every video I post, someone commenting and acting like Atlanta is the epicenter of homelessness in America. Now, homelessness is a very serious problem that Atlanta absolutely does experience, like every major city does. But according to the most recent statistics, the homeless population in Atlanta currently sits just above 2,800 people. Compare that to the city of Los Angeles, which has a homeless population of over 75,000. So while homelessness is a very serious problem that Atlanta does experience, to portray living in this city as constantly seeing the effects of homelessness in your face is not an accurate description in my opinion. Now, you will occasionally see small tent communities or one-off tents on off-ramps or underneath bridges near freeways. And you will of course see higher concentrations of homeless people around inner city churches that have homeless programs and food shelters and places like City of Refuge and around homeless shelters in the city. You can also spend a large amount of time in Atlanta's most popular neighborhoods without really encountering any homelessness. The highest concentrations would probably be found in areas of downtown or maybe Midtown or the Ponce Highlands area. But as someone who's done a decent amount of traveling around the major cities in the United States, in my own anecdotal point of view, homelessness does not stand out as a major factor that will affect the average day-to-day life of someone living in Atlanta. Now, admittedly, talking about this subject from the perspective of someone who's not homeless dealing with the effects of homelessness can seem insensitive, but this is an important thing that people consider when relocating or moving to major cities. And if every piece of content that you see about Atlanta makes it seem like the entire city is Skid Row in Los Angeles, you might have serious reservations about your plans to spend time here. So I by no means want to minimize the seriousness of the homeless issue in Atlanta. However, again, this is all just based on my experience having lived here for nearly 20 years at this point. There are homeless people in Atlanta, but it is not in front of your face at all times, impossible to ignore, nor does it usually have a major impact on the day-to-day lives of the people who are living here. Number two, Atlanta is very dirty. This goes hand in hand very often with the comment that I typically get about homelessness in the city. People, usually racist people to be honest, trying to portray the city as if it's overrun by homeless people and every corner of it is just filthy and covered in trash, which really is not true. If you've spent any time here, I mean, I'm not saying Atlanta is the cleanest city in the country. We're not the most progressive in the city, so it's not like we have all these amazing programs to make sure that, you know, the sidewalks and streets are clear at all times. However, Atlanta as a whole is decently clean. I don't typically run into huge piles of trash in random areas or piles and piles of filled dumpster bins that you often see in videos of New York City. Now, I have to say there are definitely more people throwing trash out the windows of their cars than I would like to see. It's hard for me to imagine anyone visiting here for the first time would be struck by it being particularly dirty or full of trash. Now, this criticism would actually be more valid if it were pointed towards our watershed. Unfortunately, due to a number of factors, most of which are political, our beautiful rivers like the Chattahoochee are quite dirty and unsafe at times. And that is also the case for many of the other rivers and lakes that are in Metro Atlanta. But that would be a separate criticism and one that would be based in fact. So if you're planning to visit or move here and you're concerned about this comment that you've seen, yes, there are some dirtier parts of Atlanta, and of course, like any major city, there's going to be trash on the ground from time to time. But again, don't let random internet commenters make you think this whole city is LA Skid Row. The third most common lie I see about living in Atlanta is that the suburbs are racist. And this is almost as stupid as someone saying that Atlanta is dirty and full of homeless people. In many of the videos I make about Atlanta's suburbs, you'll have people commenting how that's not for them or how there's no diversity. And you even have people saying that some of these suburbs are still sundown towns, which is a horrific and untrue accusation. Now, to be very fair, a lot of these accusations are rooted in a very real and very true history. For example, Forsyth County has just a flat out horrific reputation and history for race relations in every form. And it wasn't that long ago in history where there were neighborhoods in places like Forsyth that were true sundown towns. However, the year is now 2025, and although you absolutely could experience racism not only in one of those suburbs, but anywhere around Atlanta, anywhere around Georgia, anywhere in the country, many of the counties in Metro Atlanta are more diverse than people realize. Gwinnett, Cobb, Henry County, Fulton County, Fayette County, and DeKalb are all extremely diverse counties with lots of different types of people living in them, and there is certainly nowhere in Metro Atlanta that could legitimately be classified as a sundown town anywhere in the recent history of this state. So again, I am in no way downplaying this issue or attempting to suggest that racism isn't alive and well in many areas around Metro Atlanta. But the idea that any particular city, neighborhood, or county in Metro Atlanta is inherently racist or unwelcoming to non-white people is not an accurate portrayal of what it's like to live here. In fact, my experience has been that most people in Metro Atlanta know how to and are very comfortable living with and among different people, whether that be a different race, religion, or political view. Now, unfortunately, there are ignorant people everywhere, even in the heart of the city of Atlanta. So you may have had negative racial experiences, and obviously, as a white person, my experience is going to be very different than a person of colors. But that doesn't change the fact that I think you should ignore someone commenting on a video about the suburbs of Atlanta that an entire area is racist or unwelcoming. There is nothing inherently racist about Atlanta's suburbs. Number 4, the Ku Klux Klan is still active in Stone Mountain. Now, going along with the previous topic, I see this anytime I post about Stone Mountain, which is a popular amenity for people living in Metro Atlanta for a lot of different uses and reasons. You'll inevitably get some comment about how the Klan is active there. Now, the reality is that the KKK has held rallies at Stone Mountain in the past. However, to suggest that that is some sort of epicenter of KKK activity would be just flat out false. Stone Mountain is extremely close to the city of Atlanta and extremely diverse. It's in DeKalb County and has a large Black and Latin American population. And I don't think it's an area where any minority would need to feel particularly worried about being singled out for the color of their skin. The KKK unfortunately holds rallies in all different places, and the Confederate carving that is in Stone Mountain is probably a big reason why they focus on their area to do so. And of course, this is abhorrent and disgusting, and there has been a lot of talk of that carving being removed or replaced somehow. None of that means Stone Mountain is a hub or base for the KKK or an inherently racist area. As I said, it's a very diverse area. It's extremely close to the city of Atlanta. And I think Stone Mountain is a great option for a place to live for all kinds of people, particularly if you need to be a good distance from the city, but don't want to be right in the heart of it. So yes, there are occasionally Klan rallies at Stone Mountain, but that doesn't mean Stone Mountain is a racist area. The fifth lie I see all the time is that any neighborhood south of I-20 is dangerous. Now, I post a lot of content about neighborhoods in South and West Atlanta, and unfortunately on every video I do, I'm told I'm in the quote-unquote ghetto. And this really bothers me and is just flat out untrue. There are so many amazing neighborhoods south of I-20 and on the west side of Atlanta, whether it's inside the perimeter or just outside the perimeter. Now, yes, historically, many neighborhoods on this side of town are lower income and higher crime, but many of these areas have changed tremendously over the past few years and don't deserve this reputation that they still get. For example, the Tri-Cities of College Park, East Point, and Hapeville. These are some of my favorite areas to talk about because they have great proximity to the airport while being inside the perimeter. The architecture of these homes is often gorgeous, and the price points are often much better than their counterparts on the north side of the city. But beyond that, there are so many perfectly safe, family-friendly areas in the south side of town and the west side of town around Atlanta. Atlanta is extremely micro, meaning your experience can change rapidly going from not just neighborhood to neighborhood, but subdivision to subdivision and even street to street. So are there going to be certain parts of town, certain streets that for whatever reason have really bad activity that you want to stay away from? Sure, but that's almost never a reason to cross a neighborhood off your list completely. Most of the comments about neighborhoods south of I-20 and Atlanta are completely antiquated and made by people who have not spent any time in these areas in years or often ever. So whether you're visiting here or relocating here permanently, do not let anyone dissuade you from spending time in or considering living in neighborhoods south of I-20 or on the west side of Atlanta. Now, the sixth and final lie about Atlanta just might get the most pushback of anything on my list, and that is Lake Lanier is not haunted or cursed. If you follow Atlanta-related content long enough, you'll certainly see videos, and if you read Metro Atlanta News, you will read stories about incidences that happen at Lake Lanier, people dying, whether it be a drowning or a boat fire or a random electrocution. There's no doubt there have been a lot of fatal incidences related to Lake Lanier. And if you look at the history of Lake Lanier, it does make sense how many people would jump to the conclusion that the lake itself is cursed. However, if we want to stop and be serious for a second, if you look into any of these actual news stories and get into the specificity of what happened, there's almost always alcohol or some type of drug involved. The issue is almost always with the person and not the circumstance. The fact of the matter is, lakes are dangerous places for intoxicated or careless people. So although the history of Lake Lanier is sketchy to say the least, and is certainly great fodder for ghost-related History Channel shows, I hope you don't actually plan to avoid Lake Lanier due to seeing this type of content or comments on videos about Lake Lanier. The truth is, it's one of Metro Atlanta's most popular amenities, especially in the warmer months. And as long as you're careful and respect the water and whatever motor vehicle that you are interacting with on that day, you should be safe and you will probably have a great time. All right, so there you have it, 6 lies about living in Atlanta, Georgia, and the truth from someone who has lived here since 2008. Be very careful about what you believe to be true in terms of comments you see on Atlanta content, because much of it is untrue. I would suggest that you come here and experience this great city for yourself. Thank you for watching. I really hope that provided you value. Let me know in the comments what kind of content you want to see going forward. Please like and subscribe, and until my next video, I'll see you next time.